A woman rubbed contaminated skin cream on her face. This is what happened to her brain. BD is a 46-year-old woman presenting to the emergency room with slurred speech and blurred vision. 2 weeks earlier, she was at this same emergency room because her hands had become weak. An intense pins and needles feeling turned them completely numb. Back then, it didn't seem like anything immediately life-threatening was happening to her, but now that she can't see or speak clearly, it means something terrible is happening to her. A few years ago, BD believed that she had problems with blemishes on her skin. To her, these dark spots were terrible signs of aging and sun damage, and she had to do something about this before it was too late. A friend had told her about skin lightening cream that helps with this. These contain special ingredients that were ethically sourced from various corners of the world that gently inactivate certain enzymes in the skin to fix and prevent blemishes. These were so effective that access to this cream could only be had through special ordering channels, but BD was in luck. Her friend had contact with the most authoritative source on importing these creams, as she was able to order a large supply and start using them. BD applied this cream to her face twice daily, and the blemishes were going away, but over time, she started noticing something was wrong. One evening, BD suddenly emptied her stomach from both ends. When she rinsed out her mouth with water afterwards, a metallic taste pierced into her cheeks. A burning sensation rolled over her tongue, but she really wasn't sure what this was. It didn't hurt, and it would come and go. BD didn't think too much about all of this happening, and she continued to apply the skin lightening cream to her face. One day, BD noticed that she kept dropping her phone. Originally, she thought that maybe it was just slippery, but a pins and needles feeling in her hands started getting more and more intense. It would wake her up at night. In the emergency room, doctors didn't find anything immediately life-threatening. They sent her home and scheduled an appointment with a different doctor who wanted her to come back after a couple weeks to see how she was doing, but BD wasn't going to last a couple more weeks. She started having trouble seeing, and she couldn't drive anymore. She had trouble speaking because her family couldn't understand what she was saying, and she started having trouble walking, bringing us back to the emergency room where we are now. At examination, the medical team were concerned about two things. BD went from having weakness and numbness in her hands to having blurred vision, unsteady gait, and slurred speech, all in the time span of 2 weeks. The speed of her decline gives them clues as to what's happening, but not only this, where this is happening gives them a second set of clues. Clearly, BD's problems are related to her nerves, but where specifically? Her problem is not just some of her nerves, because it devolved into a problem spanning her entire body, from the way that she moves to her senses. This means that there could be something wrong with her brain. But an MRI reveals nothing wrong. There's no visible structural abnormalities. Her brain isn't swelling and folding on itself. It doesn't have anything abnormal growing out of it. She also doesn't have a fever, so this likely isn't an infection like meningitis. When the medical team took a routine blood test, they find that BD is normal. As the days pass, they find that BD would have random, delirious episodes in between long periods of silence where she would sit there and stare into the void. When sounds came out of her mouth, they were just mumbles and screams. One of the new doctors on the team decided to order a blood test, different from the ones that had been done routinely. The final cause of BD's problems that hadn't really been looked through was a toxic one. And when they looked at the results, they find that BD's mercury levels are 1,400 times the upper limit of normal. And this explains everything happening to her. But what's in her blood is only a part of what's in her body, meaning that there's likely even more mercury that's absorbed into her organs. So, how did she get this much mercury in her blood? This brings us to the idea of absorption. Mercury is a metal. It's the only one that's liquid at room temperature on Earth. In this form, it doesn't absorb into the skin. You'll see that it rolls right off, and the bulk fluid doesn't enter the body. This is why you'll hear people say that they touched mercury from a thermometer, and they'll ask why they didn't get mercury poisoning. It's because it doesn't absorb into the skin, but rather in this form, sometimes small amounts of vapor can come up from the liquid and get inhaled, and that vapor can cause mercury poisoning. This would be considered elemental mercury poisoning, but it isn't what happened to BD. When the medical team asked her family more about when all of this started, they learned that BD had been using a skin lightening cream 2 times daily for 7 years. And when the medical team saw that it had no ingredients on its label, they contacted the state and the poison center for further instructions. In the laboratory, the public health department analyzed the cream. High levels of mercury were found, but something was wrong. When creams like this have mercury, it's usually in a salt form. Table salt that we add to food is sodium chloride, where sodium is the part that's a metal. But we don't think of sodium really as a metal, because we think of it in the form that floats around in our blood as an electrically charged particle. Instead of sodium, mercury can be the metal in salt. This is the form that you may have heard of in old medicines like a treatment for syphilis. Salt forms like this tend to break up in the body, leaving the metal floating around as a charged particle, ending in mercury poisoning. The mercury found in BD's skin lightening cream was a salt, but it's more complex than that. Instead of just mercury ion as the metal, it was a chemical called methyl mercury. Oil is a mixture of several different hydrocarbons, and this methyl hydrocarbon branch attached to mercury was what BD was rubbing onto her face. This carbon-containing mercury is called an organic mercury. Mercury salt and organic mercury, unlike elemental mercury, absorb through the skin and into the body. So, BD applying this cream to her face every day, twice daily, accumulated mercury in her body, but what was it doing? Mercury is a heavy metal. When elements are heavy, it means that they have a lot of mass. The human body is made almost entirely of 6 elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. None of these elements are heavy. They're pretty light. They're not massive, and this means that they're typically stable. But mercury isn't light. It's relatively stable in its elemental form, but that's not the form in BD's body. This mercury has a tendency towards instability, and in order to stabilize itself, it's going to interact with parts and structures in the body, and this is where the permanent damage happens. Our physical form is made of proteins, and proteins are chains of 20 different amino acids. Amine referring to nitrogen. Some of these amino acids have sulfur, and it's here where mercury preferentially likes to act. Cells like to pump electrolytes in and out so they can maintain balance, but when mercury is present, it breaks the pumps because those pumps are made of proteins that have sulfur. Without balance, the cells can't function properly. Hair is made of proteins that are rich in sulfur. This sulfur is why burning hair smells bad, but it's also why mercury can be found in hair. When hair is tested, it can be used to detect large mercury ingestions, but hair binds to environmental mercury, which never entered the person's body. At least in the United States, large amounts of mercury shouldn't be floating around in the air, and it shouldn't be on surfaces. But hair can collect it based on this contact, so it could lead one to believe that they've ingested mercury when in fact they haven't. Cells need to break down chemicals when they're done with them. For example, when nerve signals are sent, the neurotransmitters that sent those signals need to be taken away. Enzymes do this breaking down, but enzymes are proteins. When someone is poisoned with mercury, those enzymes don't work anymore. Do you remember that oil is made of hydrocarbon chains? Well, oil doesn't mix with water, but it mixes with other oils and fats. Knowing that BD's skin lightening cream had methyl mercury, a hydrocarbon branch, we know that it preferentially mixes with fat tissue in the body. But everything in the body has fat. Cells have a lipid bilayer, and methylmercury gets in and breaks the enzymes inside, causing toxicity. Is there a part of the body that has more fat than others? Well, the brain is 60% fat. Because fat dissolves in fat and blood is made of water, which isn't fat, then mercury gathered into her nerves and her brain. BD had movement disorders. This tells us that mercury has deposited into the part of her brain that controls movement called the cerebellum. And unfortunately, we have enough information on methylmercury poisoning to know that this is typical. In 1956, Minamata City in Japan, by the water, a 5-year-old girl presented to the emergency room with difficulty walking, trouble speaking, and seizures. 2 days later, her younger sister presented with exactly the same symptoms. Their mother told the doctors that their neighbor's daughter also had been experiencing the same problems, prompting public health officials to investigate a potential outbreak, and they found 8 people in the neighborhood with the same signs and symptoms. Officials who were investigating found that cats living in the area would have convulsions before passing away, something that the locals called cat dancing disease. Crows and other birds would suddenly fall from the sky, their bodies unable to move normally. Fish would float up to the surface of the water and become lifeless. All of this started to make more sense when they realized that a local chemical factory had been dumping wastewater into the bay, and inside that wastewater was methyl mercury. The fish absorbed it into their bodies through the water. The cats and the birds would eat the fish and accumulate mercury, causing the same problems that happen in humans, because the locals living in the town also ate the fish. Typically, we refrain from naming diseases after specific locations because, in this case, chemical factories can be anywhere, and this mercury poisoning can also happen anywhere. But when the medical team did BD's first blood test, finding out that she had mercury poisoning, her blood levels were 10 times the average person who got sick from this incident in Minamata City. Do you remember that mercury likes to bind to sulfur? Well, that means that there might be a way to remove the mercury from BD. The medical team used succimer. Technically, the sulfur here should be able to surround the mercury. It should be able to prevent it from binding to any more proteins in the body, further preventing damage. The problem is, succimer won't be able to displace mercury already absorbed into her organs, and even worse, succimer won't be able to reverse the damage that mercury has already done. Methylmercury poisoning is scary because it doesn't immediately produce symptoms. The delayed onset appears to be due to how it distributes into fat tissue. The body takes longer to clear it out, and it does so through the GI tract. The studies suggest that it takes almost a year to clear out most of it from the blood, but studies also suggest that once it absorbs into neurologic tissue, it changes. Experiments and a separate autopsy of someone who survived methylmercury poisoning for 22 years showed that mercury was still present in the brain all those years later, and that it had converted into inorganic mercury, like from the salt form. As the days pass, BD's continuously given the succimer in an effort to remove the mercury from her blood. She hadn't used the skin cream for several weeks at this point, but the medical team determined that she needs to be transferred to a hospital that can take better care of her. But why was the mercury in the cream? Well, some skin lightening products utilize mercury. The body uses metal ions for various functions. In normal function, copper ion is used in the enzyme that produces melanin, the substance that produces hair, eye, and skin pigmentation. Mercury competes with this copper ion, and as mercury does, it inactivates the enzyme inhibiting melanin production, resulting in a skin lightening effect. So some of these products already have mercury in them, but normally they have the inorganic salt version. So while BD's product probably was going to have mercury in it, her issue is that the particular jar that she was using was contaminated with organic methylmercury. BD's case is significant because it was the first time that methylmercury was found to be in these skin lightening products that were imported. But even more, the US Food and Drug Administration issued a consumer update to warn that mercury poisoning is now being more commonly linked to skin products, particularly ones that are marketed as anti-aging or skin lightening. These products are often spread by word of mouth, and they may be used to treat age spots, freckles, and blemishes, like what BD was looking to do. And teenagers may use these products to help with acne. Sometimes these products will tell you straight up on their label that they contain mercury, but sometimes these words aren't immediately obvious, like when it says calomel, which is a name for mercury chloride, so it's the inorganic salt. Other times, the label doesn't even list any of the ingredients, but in the worst cases, the product is contaminated with ingredients never listed in the first place, which appears to be what happened to BD. In the United States, a federal law requires that ingredients be listed on the label of any cosmetic. When products are imported unlawfully, sometimes they won't have that label, but remember, these skin creams will have dermal absorption. It wouldn't be abnormal for someone to use them and then somehow touch a kitchen countertop or handle food eaten by other members of the household, which would expose them too to mercury, causing a toxic response. And remember, mercury poisoning, especially from the carbon-containing organic mercury, has a delayed onset. By the time one experiences symptoms, it's already too late because it's already absorbed into their body and there's no way to reliably remove what's settled in their organs. Always check the label on cosmetics and always exercise caution with products, especially ones that may have been brought into the country unlawfully. For BD, after extensive succimer treatment and a very long hospital stay at various institutions, she was still not able to speak for herself. She wasn't able to care for herself, and she needed a feeding tube because she wasn't able to eat anymore, as she could not make a recovery. There's a lot of things that people will somehow get into their body that's unlawful, or maybe it's semi-lawful. Some of them I can more directly talk about, like this video, which I have available exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is a streaming service that was created by creators, and it's a place where we can make and publish videos and films and originals as we see them. There's cases that I would totally get in trouble talking about here, but they are and will be on Nebula. We got shows, documentaries, films, plays, and Nebula is able to offer this thanks to funding that comes in from subscribers who, in addition to getting all of these, also get early access to these creators' regular videos ad-free. My chemistry buddy Niall Red posts his videos early, ad-free on Nebula. But this isn't just videos that you'll find on YouTube earlier. It's also exclusives and originals. In an afternoon, I watched all of Joe Scott Presents Mysteries of the Human Body. Speaking of things that somehow get into people's bodies, I really like this episode, Weird Stuff That Might Be Inside You Right Now. And also the scientific aspect of this episode, Why Can't We Stop Death? And there's more than just science originals. There's history, film, culture, news, travel, money, urbanism, animation, tech, and a lot more. Come join us. If you sign up at nebula.tv/chubbyemu, which is the link in the description, you'll receive a big 40% off a yearly subscription, which is $30 for the year, $250 a month, and you'll get full access to the whole platform. And I know this might not be for everyone, but right now, Nebula has a pay once, forever lifetime subscription deal. Again, I know that's not for everybody, but Nebula is entirely owned by creators, so that lifetime subscription goes towards funding Nebula creators to create. There's a whole lot of cool projects, Nebula originals currently in production, and we just launched a film studio. We're growing, and we're becoming a home for independent creativity. See you there, nebula.tv/chubbyemu. Thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourself, and be well.